Hail to legal warriors. In this video, I'm going to cover how to protect yourself from the police. Are the police allowed to stop you or detain you for no reason? You might be surprised. If you're interested in this area of the law, stay tuned. This is the video for you. My name is Attorney Lance Fryrear. I'm a defense attorney in Linwood, Washington. My law firm's been defending people charged with crimes all throughout Washington state for more than 20 years by putting out these videos to help educate the public. So if you find this useful, please like and please subscribe. More people get the help they need. Now I'm just going to jump right into it. Can the police stop or detain you for no reason? Well, as you might guess, the answer is it depends. Under the law, if the officer is going to do a stopping of somebody either walking on the road or driving a motor vehicle, the case law that applies all throughout the nation is a case called Terry v. Ohio. It basically says that a police officer, to make a lawful detention of somebody, even a temporary detention where someone isn't free to leave, they need to have a reasonable and articulable suspicion that some type of breaking the law is afoot, right? They don't have to actually know that it's happening, but they have to have more than just a hunch. They have to have it's reasonable to think something is going on, and articulable. They have to be able to say specific facts of why they think somebody is breaking the law. And that could apply differently in different situations. What we think about mainly is driving down the road, right? Does an officer have the right to pull us over if we're driving down the road? And that also means it depends. If an officer views a traffic infraction, weaving outside of one's lane, even weaving within the lane if it's for a long time, there's different rules in different jurisdictions. I'm in Washington state. If they see a traffic infraction, generally speaking, they're going to have a right to pull someone over to address the traffic infraction. Now, what if they're pulling someone over because they see a traffic infraction, but they're really trying to address a crime, right? It's a pretense. They're following someone, seeing if they'll speed, seeing if they'll weave, that type of thing. Are they allowed to do that? And the answer is mainly yes, they are. However, there's a case in Washington state called Ladson out there that says if the officer objectively testifies that they would not have pulled over that vehicle for the infraction witnessed, but they were really looking for a crime, then that's not allowable. So good luck getting an officer to say that. But one example where that actually happened in my practice is I had a client that was leaving a well-known bar where officers hung out to stop people for DUI. And the bar was in a parking lot, where you'd have to, go out and exit onto the street like we would think, right? Any type of general shopping area. And the officer pulled over a vehicle because it failed to signal coming out of the parking lot. And, an officer would have the right to pull someone over for failing to signal, but it was 1 a.m. It was bar time almost. And so the officer testified in the Department of Licensing hearing. We got the officer to say, no, if I wasn't looking for a DUI, I probably would not have pulled that vehicle over in the middle of the day for not signaling coming out of a parking lot. I was looking for DUIs. Normally I wouldn't pull someone over for not coming out of a parking lot signaling because it's not that serious. Well, when the officer testified to that, the officer admitted that that was a pretext stop and that objectively that they only did that stop because they were looking for evidence of a crime. And in Washington law, that's not allowable, okay? So that officer probably testified differently next time, right? He would probably say, yes, I pull over everybody who doesn't signal. But there is some amount of teeth, although not sharp teeth, in Washington law about challenging an officer pulling someone over for infraction when they're really looking for a crime. But we have to think in most DUI cases, what does an officer do? They're tracking a vehicle. They're looking for speeding too fast. They're looking for going too slow. They're looking for not signaling. They're looking for leaving the lane of travel, hitting the shoulder. And those are all going to be valid reasons to stop a car, even to look for a DUI, because an officer would testify in that case, hey, I always pull someone over for that. What's another situation that we come across where we could worry about protecting ourselves from the police? It's where an officer pulls you over when they have no personal knowledge of anything that you've done wrong. The most common example of that would be when there's a domestic violence dispute or there's a dispute at home, and the husband calls on the wife, "Hey, my wife's driving drunk, and I didn't want her to leave, and I'm really mad at her. So, and here's the license plate, and here's the description." And so in some cases, an officer will go find that vehicle, and then they'll follow the vehicle looking for a traffic infraction or something to justify a stop outside of what the husband said, or outside of what a independent witness might say. Like if you ever have followed a vehicle down the interstate and they were weaving and you're pretty sure they're drunk and you called the police, do the police have to establish their own reason to pull a car over besides either the husband reporting it or that do good person calling in the possible drunk driver? Again, the answer is it depends. The basic line of case law, including a case called Campbell, would say something along the lines of that if the description from the caller would give the officer independent reason to pull someone over, if it's not a conclusion, then the officer likely does not need to establish their own observed traffic infractions. So, Lance, what do you mean by that? Well, if someone calls in and says, "Hey, this driver is drunk," or "Hey, my wife is drunk," well, that's a conclusion. It doesn't describe objective facts that would otherwise be illegal, right? If it's someone driving down the road and you're calling in that person in front of you, and the person calling in the person in front of them says, "Hey, they're weaving outside of their lane and they just crossed onto the shoulder," now that's probably going to be a valid reason for the officer to pull someone over. There's other parts of the test. It's about whether or not the caller is reliable, and that depends on some complicated factors. But for the most part, you can get pulled over for no reason if the caller is describing objective facts that would otherwise be some type of a traffic infraction or some type of crime, not a conclusion like, "Hey, the driver is drunk." Okay, let's move on to another situation. What about public contact? What if we're not in a car and we're walking, minding our own business, and the officer says, hey, buddy, come on over here. I want to talk to you. Is the officer allowed to do that? Well, the officer is allowed in general to make public contact for a community caretaking function, and an officer can ask someone to come over. The question arises is, did that person who was minding their own business feel compelled to come over? Did they feel like they had a right to keep walking? Or was there some type of show of force, either literally or implied, that made it a constitutional event, thereby requiring Terry v. Ohio type articulable suspicion that criminal activity is afoot? Just because you're walking in an area where there is some type of a bad area where there's crimes happen doesn't mean that the officer has the right to detain you. An officer always has the right to ask anything the public could ask, right? "Hey, would you mind coming over here and talking to me?" is going to be less compelling than, "Hey, you come over here and talk to me now." Now that might be more of a detention. So you can see it's case by case. So if that happens to you, where an officer is telling you to come over, asking you to come over, if you want to protect yourself, you just want to ask the officer, "Am I being detained?" Right? Am I being detained? If the answer is no, then you can continue on your way. If the answer is yes, now the officer needs to justify that detention. And nowadays, a lot of officers have body cams, and they're not going to be able to wiggle out of it like they used to, right? They used to just be able to say what they want in the report, or be vague, or even be untruthful in the report, to try to justify community policing, community detention, when they're just trying to, shut down what they believe is crime, or people they don't like, or certain types of people they don't want around, where they would just do what they want and get away with it all the time. So similarly, there's a question about, can an officer just stop us? Well, how long can they stop us, right? Can they just hold us for a long time? What if we're pulled over for speeding? Are they allowed to keep us there for half an hour? looking for other crimes, right? And so again, the answer is it depends. If we're pulled over for a traffic infraction, an officer has to have a reason to detain somebody longer than what it would normally take to write out that speeding ticket, right? If they're holding you longer than is necessary to do their job for whatever they pulled you over for, again, they need to have a reasonable and articulable suspicion to justify extending the detention. Hey, I smelled marijuana once I pulled over this vehicle for speeding. Therefore, now I'm justified in asking questions about marijuana usage, or I'm justified in having someone do a field sobriety test, when before I wasn't justified to do that. If someone pulls you over for speeding and there's no other reason, they can't ask you to just do field sobriety tests if they have no reason to suspect you're under the influence. Okay, and literally they can ask what they want, but if they do it without justification, that can be challenged by an attorney later, and that evidence may be able to be suppressed. Okay, so an officer can ask people to stop. An officer can only detain people if they have an articulable reason to believe something illegal is up. And they can only extend a detention from one level to another if they have increasing articulable suspicion that criminal activity is afoot. So what's required to arrest them? If they can legally stop us, what's required to arrest? Well, arrest, they need more. They need probable cause. They need actual reason to believe a crime occurred, not just an articulable suspicion, right? Aren't these fancy words? And it's all subject to debate, and a good attorney will try to get into every little part of the case. They might even do a public disclosure request for all the prior reports of a police officer to see, do they have a pattern, right? Is there a pattern where they're stopping minorities or certain types of people that they might be illegally suspicious of, right? Because we're mainly worried about police profiling, either based upon ethnicity, based upon socioeconomic status, that type of thing. Let's move on to another situation that we see quite often. We also see a situation where you're driving down the road, you don't even commit a traffic infraction, yet you get pulled over. So what's up with that? Well, in Washington state, an officer is allowed to run publicly viewable license plates, right? If the public can see your license plate, so can an officer. And there's no privacy right in those public records about who the registered owner of the car is. And so a very common police tactic would be following cars, entering license plates into a computer, and they've got some cameras that'll do that automatically in some police departments. And then they see, hey, the registered owner of this car has a suspended license. Well, there's a law in Washington state that says, hey, if the officer learns that the registered owner of a car is suspended, in most cases, they're allowed to go ahead and stop that vehicle without any other reason to determine whether or not the driver of that vehicle is the registered owner. And so if you have a suspended license, if you're driving a car registered to you, you can get pulled over for no reason then, and that would be totally legal. The exception would be sometimes we could argue that, let's say it's registered to a female and that it appears to be a male driving. Well, the officer should at least check and identify that what they believe the gender to be of the driver is the same as the registered owner, or it's not clearly different race, clearly different, because then that might not be an allowable traffic stop. As far as if you're pulled over in a vehicle, can the officer order you out of the car? Yes, the officer can order the driver out of the car. They can totally control if the driver stays in or out of the car if you're stopped. And that also talks about, limiting your freedom. And that would be for officer safety reasons, would be the reason why that they allow that. So the main way that we can protect ourselves from being pulled over or stopped by an officer for no reason is to ask questions, right? To respectfully ask the question. Am I being detained? If the officer says no, move on. If the officer says yes, well, what am I being detained for? Again, part of this is you want to get it on the officer's either body cam or their lapel mic, so you're making them say why. Hey, I'm only stopped you for speeding, right? Great, right? I only stopped you because you match the description of someone who just stole something from the AM/PM down the street, right? You want to ask that question, am I being detained? If so, what am I being detained for? And then, of course, to protect yourself, you probably want to avoid answering questions to the officer to let them build that reasonable suspicion up, or even worse, build the probable cause up where now they have reason to arrest you. So to protect ourselves, we may remain respectful, we ask questions, we exercise our rights, and that if something does go wrong and the officer acts illegally in arresting us, then your attorney has a much better chance to challenge the case and get any evidence suppressed and thrown out that happens after any legal arrest. So I hope you found this useful. If so, please like and please subscribe. More people get the help they need. And more importantly, if you have a criminal matter in Washington State, feel free to give my office a call. If we get on board, we'll listen to what happened, we'll identify a way forward, and we will be there for you. Thank you.